make moral choices every day, right? Like, it's a constant thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
But have you ever, like, stopped and really thought about how we actually make those choices?
Like, what goes into that decision-making process?
Yeah, what's the reasoning? The why?
That's a great question.
Well, today, get ready, because we're going deep on moral development.
Ooh, I love this topic.
Yeah, it's this fascinating journey of how our thinking about, right and wrong, good and bad, how that all evolves as we grow up.
Yeah, over time, totally.
And our guide for this deep dive, the one and only Lawrence Kohlberg.
He's the psychologist who really gave us this like roadmap, this framework for understanding this whole journey.
So is Kohlberg's work, is it about judging our moral?
No, not at all.
Are we going to be scored on this? Is there a morality test?
Nope, no tests here.
Okay, good.
It's more about understanding the why behind our choices.
Okay.
Not just labeling them as good or bad, right or wrong.
I like that. So it's more like what? A way to explore our own moral compass, to see kind of where we fall on this spectrum of moral reasoning.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, I'm intrigued. So where does this whole moral journey even begin?
Well, think about it.
We're not exactly born with a fully developed sense of ethics, right?
Yeah, no, definitely not.
Okay, so spill the beans. Where do we start?
All right, so it all starts with the basics, right? Level 1, what Kohlberg called pre-conventional morality.
Pre-conventional.
This is where, most kids under 9 kind of operate.
Really?
Yeah, and their moral world it's pretty simple at this point.
Yeah.
It's all about rewards and punishments.
It's like that classic kid logic. If I don't get caught eating cookies before dinner, it's not really wrong.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, that's a perfect example.
It's all about me.
That's stage 1 of this level.
Stage 1, okay.
And Kohlberg actually termed obedience and punishment orientation.
Obedience and punishment.
And so, the focus isn't so much on understanding the concept of right and wrong, but more about just avoiding those consequences.
Yeah. Makes sense.
If I do this, something bad will happen.
Right.
So I won't do it.
Okay. And then I guess as kids get a little older, they start to realize, oh, wait, cooperation. That can get me what I want sometimes too.
Yeah, exactly.
If I share my toys with you now, maybe you'll play with me later.
That's a perfect example of stage 2.
Stage 2.
Which he called the instrumental relativist orientation.
Okay.
And, there's still that element of self-interest for sure.
Right.
But now it's there's this recognition that cooperation and fairness, those things can be beneficial too.
Yeah, there's an angle, I can get something out of this.
Exactly.
So even in these really early stages, it's interesting. There's that shift from just blindly obeying to realizing that sometimes playing by the rules can benefit you too.
Right.
But the big question, do we ever really fully outgrow this pre-conventional mindset?
That's a good question.
I feel like even as adults, sometimes we slip right back into what's in it for me.
Oh, absolutely. Think about it.
Yeah.
Those little everyday choices.
Give me an example.
Okay. You're at the grocery store, self-checkout.
Yep.
You sneak an extra item in there.
Oh, come on. Who hasn't done that?
Right. You know it's wrong, but
But the risk is low.
risk is low. And, hey, free snack.
Okay, yeah, I've definitely been guilty of some pre-conventional thinking.
I think we all have.
But hopefully, as we mature, our moral compass evolves, right? It goes beyond just avoiding punishment.
Absolutely.
So where do we go next?
All right, so that brings us to level 2, which is conventional morality.
Okay, conventional.
But things get a little more, conventional here.
In what way?
So this level usually kicks in around adolescence.
Okay.
And actually, many adults, they continue to operate within this framework for, a good chunk of their lives.
So this is probably where, peer pressure starts to really become a big deal, right?
Oh, yeah.
It's not just mom and dad's rules anymore.
Oh.
It's about fitting in with the crowd.
You got it. So that's
Okay.
stage 3,
Right.
with good boy, good girl orientation.
Good boy, good girl.
And the focus here, it shifts to gaining approval,
Okay.
belonging, being seen as a good person.
By your friends, by society.
Exactly.
So we go from wanting to avoid punishment to wanting to be liked.
Yeah.
What's next?
So from wanting to be liked, we move towards wanting to be right,
Oh, okay.
or at least doing what's considered right by society.
I see.
And that is stage 4, the law and order orientation.
Law and order, that sounds serious.
A little bit, yeah.
So at this stage, it's all about following the rules, being a good citizen, upholding the law.
You got it.
Okay.
At this stage, laws and rules, they're not just about avoiding punishment anymore.
Right.
They're seen as crucial, like, for maintaining a stable society, a functional society.
That makes sense.
There's a strong emphasis on doing your duty, respecting authority.
Contributing to the greater good.
Exactly.
So we've gone from worrying about like personal consequences to recognizing the importance of rules for everyone. But things have got to get even more complex as we go higher on this Kohlberg ladder, right?
You're right, they do.
Okay.
Buckle up, because we're entering level 3,
Hit me.
post-conventional morality.
Okay. Post-conventional.
Now, this is where things get, well, a little more philosophical.
Ooh, I was hoping you'd say that. So what makes this level so different?
All right, so it's not about rebelling against the system necessarily.
Okay.
It's more nuanced than that.
All right.
It's about recognizing that laws and rules, while they're important,
Yeah.
they're not always perfect.
Okay.
Or just
They can be flawed.
exactly. And at this level, individuals, they start to develop their own principles.
Their own, like not just what they've been told.
Right. And these are often based on abstract concepts like justice, human rights, the greater good. And sometimes these principles can even conflict with existing laws or social norms.
Ooh, interesting. So it's less about blindly following and more about critically examining and deciding, do these rules actually align with my deeper sense of what's right?
Exactly. And think about like historical figures like Martin Luther King Jr. or Gandhi.
Okay, yeah.
They broke laws that they believed were unjust.
Right, but they did so peacefully.
They did, with the goal of achieving a higher moral good.
Okay, so this level really elevates the game.
It does.
It's not just about being obedient or even being a good citizen. It's about actively challenging things when your personal sense of justice, of ethics, tells you something's off.
Right. And that's where we get into stage 5.
Okay, stage 5.
The social contract orientation.
Social contract.
So here, laws are still seen as important, of course,
Totally.
for a functioning society.
We need some rules.
We do, but there's this acknowledgement that they can be flawed,
Okay.
and they should be changed if they're not really serving everyone's best interests.
So it's like saying, hey, we all agreed to play by these rules as a society, but
Right.
if the rules are actually hurting people, we need to renegotiate and come up with a fairer system.
Exactly, and there's this strong emphasis on fairness, justice, and due process at this stage.
It's not just personal opinions.
No, it's about reasoned debate
Yeah.
and trying to create a more just system for everyone.
Wow. This level is complex.
It is.
It's not just following the rules.
Right.
It's understanding the reasoning behind them and being willing to like challenge them when necessary.
Absolutely.
Okay, what's next? Is there more?
There is. This leads us to the most complex stage of all.
Okay, lay it on me.
Stage 6. Universal ethical principle orientation.
Universal ethical principle. Whoa!
Here's where individuals operate from a set of deeply internalized ethical principles.
Like what kind of principles?
Things like justice, human dignity, equality,
Concepts,
big concepts, and they believe these principles should apply to everyone,
regardless of the rules.
regardless of laws, social norms. Yeah,
This sounds like, I don't know, moral superheroes or something.
kind of, right?
Just
Driven
what?
by this deep sense of what's right.
Even if it means going against the grain.
Exactly. But here's a twist.
Oh.
Kohlberg actually removed stage 6 from his official scoring manual.
Wait, what? Really? Why? Was it just too idealistic?
It's a great question.
Too hard to measure? Too difficult to achieve?
Well, it sparked a lot of debate, for sure.
I bet.
Some people argue it's almost impossible to consistently operate at this level.
Right.
While others believe it's this, like, moral aspiration we should all strive for.
So it's like the ultimate peak, but maybe so high so few ever reach it.
Maybe, but even if stage 6 is difficult to achieve all the time, it still brings up these important questions
Like what?
about what it means to live a truly ethical life.
Ooh, deep. My brain is doing some gymnastics over here.
It's good to get those moral muscles working.
Okay, so how did Kohlberg actually study all of this?
Well, have you ever heard of the Heinz dilemma?
The Heinz dilemma. It rings a bell, vaguely.
Okay, so it's a story about a man named Heinz
Heinz. Okay.
whose wife is dying from cancer. And there's this drug that could potentially save her,
Okay.
but it's incredibly expensive.
Of course.
And the druggist who made the drug refuses to lower the price, even though Heinz has tried, like, everything to raise the money.
So he's desperate.
He's desperate.
Okay.
So Heinz considers breaking into the druggist's shop and stealing the drug for his wife.
Wow, that's a tough one. So what happens? Does he steal it?
Well, that's not the point.
It's not.
Remember, Kohlberg wasn't interested in a yes or no answer.
Oh.
He was interested in the reasoning behind the answer.
Interesting.
Like, why did they think it was right or wrong to steal?
I see.
What moral principles, what values did they use to justify their decision?
So it's like a moral Rorschach test.
Exactly.
The answers reveal how they think about morality, not just what they would do in that specific situation.
Exactly.
That's fascinating.
Right.
And so by analyzing people's responses to this dilemma and others like it, Kohlberg identified these different stages and figured out how people seem to progress through them.
Over time. Yep.
This is making me think about all those times I've, debated ethical dilemmas with friends or family, and how often it feels like we're just talking past each other. Maybe that's because we're coming at it from totally different moral stages.
That's a really insightful observation.
Really?
It gets to the heart of why Kohlberg's work, even with its limitations, is still so relevant today.
Okay.
It gives us this new vocabulary, this framework, to understand the different ways people approach these really complex moral issues.
Even when those approaches conflict with our own?
Exactly.
So instead of just assuming someone's wrong or bad because they see things differently, we can try to understand their reasoning.
Their perspective.
Maybe they're at a stage focused on rules and authority while we're thinking more about individual rights.
Yeah, or the greater good.
Exactly.
Recognizing this can be a bridge to better conversations.
More productive, for sure. Okay, this is all really interesting, but I'm sure there are some criticisms of Kohlberg's theory, right? No theory is perfect.
Oh, of course. And we'll dive into those critiques, explore some alternative perspectives on moral development right after a short break.
Stay tuned. Okay, so we've laid out Kohlberg's stages, but I'm guessing, no theory is without its critics, right?
Oh, absolutely.
What are some of the main objections people have raised?
Well, one of the biggest came from psychologist Carol Gilligan.
Okay.
She argued that Kohlberg's theory, with its focus on justice and abstract principles, it might be a bit too skewed toward, a typically male perspective.
Interesting. What makes her say that?
Well, she felt that his model didn't fully account for the way many women approach these moral decisions, which often prioritize things like care and empathy and relationships.
I see.
So she felt like reducing morality down to applying abstract principles missed a big part of the picture.
So are we saying women are less morally developed?
No, not at all.
Okay, good.
It's not about being more or less developed,
right,
but recognizing that there are different ways of approaching these problems.
Different ways of getting to that moral decision.
Exactly. And Gilligan, she actually proposed her own model, what's known as care ethics.
Care ethics.
Which highlights, the importance of empathy, compassion, responsibility.
In how we make those moral choices. So it's not that one model is right and the other is wrong.
Right.
It's like they're highlighting different sides of this really complex issue.
Absolutely.
Kohlberg gives us a framework for creating a just society.
Yeah.
And Gilligan's like, hey, don't forget, a truly moral society also needs compassion and care.
That's a great way to put it.
It needs to be woven into how we operate.
Yeah, and it really underscores that moral development isn't just this linear climb.
Up a ladder. Yeah.
It's a multifaceted process shaped by so many factors.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
It makes me think about those times I felt conflicted about a decision. Sometimes I feel ready to fight injustice, like a superhero,
Right.
But other times I just want to grab that extra cookie and not think too hard.
We've all been there.
No judgment.
Exactly. Kohlberg stages, they're more like guideposts along a winding path.
Okay.
Not rigid boxes we fit into.
So then what's the point of learning about these stages?
That's a good question.
If we're not trying to score ourselves, how do we actually use this in our lives? What's the takeaway?
I think it's about self-awareness.
Okay.
These stages, they give us this language to analyze our own decision-making, to see our strengths, our blind spots, and maybe even understand why we clash with others who might be coming from a different place.
Because they're at a different stage.
Exactly.
So it's like this new lens to examine our own choices and to understand others.
Especially when we disagree with them.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And it can be super helpful in those moments when we're like, ugh, they just don't get it.
Right.
Totally.
Instead of writing them off, we can try to understand where they're coming from morally.
Okay, give me an example.
Okay, so maybe they're at a stage focused on rules and authority.
Okay.
And we're prioritizing individual rights or the greater good.
Right. Very different frameworks.
Right. And just recognizing that difference can help us have better conversations.
More productive dialogues, for sure.
Exactly.
Instead of just like butting heads.
Yeah.
It's about understanding.
Exactly.
I like that.
It takes the focus off of being right. And it puts it on understanding.
Yeah. Yeah. Powerful.
It also helps us to see our own inconsistencies, you know?
Oh, for sure.
Remember those times we talked about slipping into pre-conventional thinking?
Like the cookie thing?
Exactly. Understanding these stages
Yeah.
can help us catch ourselves when we're defaulting to that what's in it for me mindset.
Oh, totally. Becoming more aware.
Exactly.
Okay. I see the practical side of this now.
Good.
But what about that whole stage 6 thing?
Didn't Kohlberg end up taking it out of his model?
He did.
So what was that about?
Well, it turned out that stage 6, with its focus on universal ethical principles,
Yeah.
was incredibly difficult to define,
Sure.
let alone measure.
So was he basically admitting that true moral enlightenment is impossible?
It's more complicated than that.
Okay.
Remember, stage 6 is all about those, like, big ideas, justice, human dignity, equality.
Yeah, powerful stuff.
They are,
Yeah.
but they can also be tough to define, even harder to live by consistently.
In the real world, it's messy.
Exactly, and I think that's what makes his removal of stage 6 so interesting. It wasn't about giving up on those ideals,
Right.
but more acknowledging this tension
Yeah.
between our aspirations, right?
To be our best selves.
And the reality, that messy reality of living in a world where right and wrong, they're rarely black and white.
Yeah, there are so many gray areas.
So many.
So even though stage 6 might be elusive, it still serves as a reminder to strive for something greater, to hold ourselves to that higher standard,
Yeah. Even if we know we won't always get there.
because we're human.
Exactly.
Okay, my brain is definitely getting a workout here. We've covered so much.
It's good to exercise those moral muscles.
You said it. Remember earlier we were talking about those conversations where it feel like people are just talking past each other?
Oh, yeah, about moral issues.
Yeah, can you give me a concrete example of how understanding these stages might actually help in those situations?
Absolutely. Let's go back to that Heinz dilemma.
Okay. The guy stealing the medicine?
Yeah, so imagine two people are arguing about whether he's morally justified.
Okay, so one person's he has to save his wife. It's life or death.
Right.
And the other's like, stealing is wrong no matter what.
Exactly. And it might seem like they're just disagreeing about Heinz,
Yeah.
but they might actually be operating from very different moral stages.
Okay. I'm intrigued. Break it down for me.
So the person arguing for Heinz's actions, maybe they're at a stage where they're focused on those universal human rights. The belief that, a person's right to life outweighs property laws.
So they're thinking about the bigger picture, the ethics of the whole situation.
Exactly. But the person who's against stealing,
Yeah.
they might be at a stage where upholding the law, no matter what, is paramount.
Right. Keeping order in society.
Exactly. And recognizing this difference in their moral reasoning, that can be huge.
And how we approach those conversations. Yeah.
It's not about judging who's right or wrong, but understanding the values behind each person's perspective.
So instead of saying you're wrong,
Right.
it's more like, I see why you feel so strongly about upholding the law, but for me, human life comes first.
Exactly. You're not dismissing their viewpoint, but offering an alternative.
Based on a different framework, I like it,
It's about recognizing that morality is complex,
for sure.
and there's often more than one right way
Yeah.
to see these dilemmas.
Yeah, I love that. It's way more constructive than just yelling at each other
Right.
and getting nowhere.
And this is where Kohlberg's work is still so valuable. It gives us that framework to understand why those moral disagreements happen.
Yeah.
And, maybe more importantly, how to have better conversations about them.
I'm on board with that, totally.
Good.
But before we wrap up,
Yeah.
there's one more thing I'm wondering about.
Okay.
You mentioned earlier that Kohlberg believed people progress through these stages in a fixed order. So does everyone actually reach those higher levels?
That's a great question.
Or are some people just kind of stuck at a lower stage?
Well, that gets to the heart of some of the debate around his theory.
Okay.
Some people say his model is too rigid.
Too fixed, yeah.
Exactly. That it doesn't account for people maybe skipping stages.
Okay.
Or even regressing to earlier stages in certain situations.
That makes sense. Life's messy. People are complicated.
Exactly.
It's unrealistic to think everyone follows this perfect little path.
Right. And there's also the question of whether everyone actually reaches those higher post-conventional stages. Kohlberg's research suggested that relatively few adults consistently operate from those more principled levels.
Why is that? Are those stages just too hard to get to?
Well, some theorists believe that our environment plays a huge role.
Or upbringing, or experiences?
Exactly. Think about it.
Yeah.
We're constantly getting messages about right and wrong.
From everywhere.
Everywhere. Our families, our communities, the media.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Even our political leaders.
So if you're raised in an environment where it's all about obedience and conformity, you might be less likely to develop that critical thinking.
Yeah.
That independent judgment that's so important for those higher stages.
Exactly. And conversely, if we're exposed to diverse viewpoints, encouraged to question things, given the chance to practice making those tough ethical decisions,
we're more likely to develop a more sophisticated moral compass.
Exactly.
Wow. So it goes way beyond individual responsibility.
It does.
It's about building a society that supports moral development at every level.
Absolutely. And that's a topic we'll delve into even further in the final part of our deep dive.
Okay, I'm ready.
Because understanding how we develop morally, it's not just about individual growth.
It's about building a better world.
Exactly. A more just and compassionate world for everyone.
Okay, listeners, you heard it here first. Get ready for the grand finale of our Kohlberg deep dive. Okay, so we're back. And I feel like my brain's still buzzing a little from all that Kohlberg stuff.
It's a lot to take in, for sure.
We went through those stages, talked about those critiques, even analyzed that Heinz dilemma.
From every angle, it seems like.
Yeah. So now I'm thinking, okay, we've got all this knowledge, but like, what's the big picture? How does understanding all this actually help us? Not just as individuals, but as a society, you know?
Well, I think one of the most powerful things Kohlberg's work shows us is that, moral development, it's not like this finish line you cross.
It's not a trophy you get.
It's a journey. It's ongoing. And it's something we can actually work on, both within ourselves and in the systems around us, the institutions that kind of shape our world.
So instead of just saying, oh, well, some people are just bad,
right,
we can actually think about how to create environments that encourage ethical growth.
Exactly. Like, imagine a school system that didn't just focus on grades and test scores.
Right.
But actually gave kids the tools to think critically about ethical dilemmas,
Yeah, to understand different perspectives, like we were talking about.
And develop their own moral compass.
So it's not about giving them a set of rules to follow blindly.
Right, exactly.
It's about helping them build their own framework.
I love that. That's a great analogy, and it really applies to so many areas of life,
Oh, yeah, totally. Like, workplaces could prioritize ethical leadership.
Absolutely.
Encourage open discussions about values.
Create a culture of accountability.
Even just our everyday interactions, right? How we talk to each other, the assumptions we make, how we handle disagreements.
All of that, it can either reinforce those lower level kind of selfish patterns.
What's in it for me?
Exactly. Or it can help nudge us towards a more principled way of being.
So even small choices, those can have a big impact.
They really can. It's like a ripple effect.
When we make that effort to be more morally mindful, challenge our own biases, have thoughtful conversations.
Those ripples spread outward.
I like that.
And they contribute to a more ethical, more compassionate culture.
This is all starting to click for me.
Good.
It's not just about me becoming a better person. It's about creating a society that values moral development, like everywhere, at every level.
Exactly. And it's not about being nice all the time or avoiding conflict.
Right.
It's about having the courage to speak up for what we believe in.
To challenge injustice.
Yeah, to engage in those tough conversations, even when they're uncomfortable.
Because sometimes those are the most important ones.
They really are.
So it's like we're all on this journey together, constantly evolving, learning, and hopefully pushing each other toward a better world.
I love that. That's a beautiful way to put it.
Well, I think that's a good place to leave it for today.
Yeah, okay.
But listeners, we're going to leave you with one final thought to ponder. Knowing what you now know about moral development, what are the strongest influences shaping your own moral choices right now? And are those influences different in different areas of your life? That's something to think about. Until next time, keep on deep diving.